Good evening and welcome to NIN Live. I am Saumya Tiwari and you are watching The Real Conversations. Today, on board with us, we have Advocate Kalpana Sinha. Her field of work is constitutional law, civil law, company, and insolvency matters. She specializes in IB and dispute resolution. She graduated in law from the Allahabad University and has been formally practicing law since 4 years. Moreover, presently she is pursuing her LLM with Berkeley Law and will be joining them next year. Ma'am, we are delighted to have you with us.
Hi, Saumya. I'm happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, ma'am. So, before diving into this conversation, there's a saying that being a lawyer is merely not a profession, it is a calling. So, my curious self wants to ask you, what was that thing which led you into pursuing this calling?
Well, I would have to say that I was kind of lucky in that sense that dinner table conversations in my house revolved around the profession because I come from a long line of lawyers. So, since a very young age, I knew that that is where I wanted to be. And what kind of reinstated my faith in that decision was that I always found myself inclined towards things like literature, history, uh, the love for the language. And public speaking slowly and steadily kind of became a passion for me. So the initial thing that you have at the back of your mind, okay, that's what I want to do. That idea was reinstated over and over again and bolstered over and over again with all the things that I experienced during my academic career in school and then college. So I would say I was very lucky that way. That I never had a doubt in my mind. Okay, maybe not. Maybe law is not the profession for me.
That is really good to be really clear as to what you want to pursue, and I believe you're doing a fantastic job at it. So my first question to you ma'am, is that with the rise in protests, public discourse and demonstrations, online activism, and the contemporary media that we can refer to as the fourth estate, and its tendency to at times dissect, twist and turn facts, and regularly interpret the news to its consumers. Can we say that, if not totally, but in a way, these forces are able to influence or sway the verdict or the judgment of the judiciary? And if it is true, then are there any concrete evidences to prove my above statement?
See, as far as instances or examples go, they're numerous. But let me preface this by saying that if we're going to talk about the fourth pillar of the democracy, um, I would just like to say that any construct or society, for that matter, which wields as much power as social media or mainstream media does in today's time, it is bound to have an influence which can go either ways. It can be constructive as well as destructive. So, before I dive into the cons of it, I must point it out to you that there have been numerous instances where the system has failed, and had it not been for media attention and laudable investigative journalism, those cases and those victims would have never come to a closure and success and justice. So it's not always right to say that, okay, media trials are bad. But what I would like to say is that there is a well differentiated line between investigative journalism and a pure witch hunt. A witch hunt comes from a place of sensationalism. And that's where we go wrong. When we start fact finding or going after individual or started getting into verbal duels or something that Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi had defined as verbal terrorism, rather. Verbal terrorism or visual extremism or content fundamentalism. It is only when we get into these aspects that we go wrong. Now, the problem with a media trial is that it is bereft of the principles of law that work in a normal trial. The accused is not entitled to the same protections or benefits as they would have been in the event the trial was before a court of law and not in the court of public opinion. For example, there is no presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a media trial. There is no standard of reasonable doubt in a media trial. These protections are not available to an individual anymore when it is the court of public opinion. Forget about the loss of these protections. I believe the biggest loss is that of reputation, for which there will never be any compensation. If it does
Indeed.
not influence the judges, it most certainly influences the investigators. The stage till which the media is relevant in a trial is as far as the fact finding goes. But the moment we jump from finding the facts to analyzing them, sitting in judgment over them, and ascribing guilt, that's where the media goes wrong. And I believe that on an everyday basis, numerous news channels are flouting on a daily basis the journalism conduct norms given by the Press Trust of India. That's where we need to control things. When we talk of examples where things have gone wrong as far as the justice delivery system is concerned on account of a media trial, yes, the instances are numerous. For example, let's take the 2G case. That sector and the sensationalism that it received has resulted in such a huge impact that now a flourishing sector has gone down to a sector that is burdened with debt and conspiracy. So that's where I think the media trials have gone wrong. It's not against the freedom of speech and expression, but it is certainly against the ethical conduct of journalism.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, being a media student, I could, I would agree to what you're saying because sensationalism actually goes against the ethics that we are taught in media. So, ma'am, now coming to my second question. There has been an ongoing debate about the freedom of speech, and we can see a number of people have been adamantly raising their voices for the same. For example, a certain comedian getting arrested because he was accused of hurting the religious sentiments of a particular set of people. So,
Right.
my question is in this case, how does the judiciary come to a conclusion? Or to simply put it, what are the criterion under which I, as a citizen, could exercise my freedom of speech? And what draws the line between freedom of speech does not imply freedom from the consequences?
See, the judiciary is under a constitutional mandate to protect the freedoms guaranteed by it. As a matter of fact, it is under a mandate to protect those freedoms with the full force of the law. Uh, it is only when the executive starts to misuse those provisions to restrict dissent or muzzle unpopular opinion, it is only then that you see the kind of arrests that we have been seeing in everyday life these days. As you mentioned, a comedian or an environmentalist or an activist, people of such nature. But what I have also seen is that where the executive has gone wrong in its attempt to muzzle dissent, the judiciary has come forward with full force. If you see in the judgment of Dr. Kafil Khan that has recently been upheld by the Supreme Court, the Allahabad High Court had used very strong terms as far as protection of freedom and speech and expression go. Similarly, same story was in the case of Devangana Kalita when the Delhi High Court granted her bail. Again, another example of the same would be Munawar Faruqi. He received ad interim bail from the Supreme Court. Again, very strong words were used for protection of the freedom of speech and expression. As far as the constitutional restrictions go, I can list them out to you in easy terms. But what is difficult is that those terms are subject to very wide interpretations. And this is where the citizenry has to repose faith in the judiciary that they will always protect those liberties with every power that they can exercise. For freedom and speech and expression, the only saying that comes to my mind is one of Voltaire, where he said, ki, I despise what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. So that's the role that the judiciary is playing right now, even if they don't despise it. But for dissent, I believe, is an essential condition of legitimate governance. For a government to be truly democratic, laws and policies must be adopted through the democratic exercise. And if a government wishes to muzzle that dissent,
Hmm.
uh, preventing people from expressing their conviction about right and wrong, then that is not a truly democratic government. So dissent is important, and so is its protection for the
Yeah.
democracy to be truly vibrant.
Okay, ma'am. So my next question to you is: we are talking about judiciary, but it would be unfair if we do not talk about those intellectually equipped people who supervise the helm of this paramount pillar of democracy. So I think the number of sanctioned judges in the Supreme Court is 34, and presently there are 27 sitting judges in the Supreme Court of India. But what personally startled me was that there was just one female sitting judge in the Supreme Court, that is
Correct.
Honorable Ms. Justice Indira Banerjee. So please
That's
shed light on the fact that why are such disparities at the play?
uh, see, every profession has a glass ceiling, if you ask me. Every walk of life has a glass ceiling. And that's just a fact of the society. Uh, in the almost 70 years of independence, there have only been 8 female judges in the Supreme Court. And you're not wrong when you say that there is a disparity, but I genuinely believe that in the next 20 years, you will see a sea change in that situation. As society is moving forward and public opinion and way of life and gender equality is evolving, I believe that very soon you will see that this disparity is reduced significantly. And I would like to believe that it will be my generation that does so. But I believe the reason behind that, if I had to answer that question, it would be uh, when you join the profession, um, and you get past the first initial years and you get to a stage of life where you have to get married or start a family, the difficulties with the attrition rate, it's not how many women join the profession, but it is about how many women continue with the profession and how many women come back to the profession after taking a leave to start a family or look after them or manage a household. These are practical realities. We cannot run away from them. Even if we assign equal roles to both genders in a marriage, there is still a lot that goes into nurturing and maintaining a family. You have to take some time away from work for it to work. So I believe as public opinion and the women in law are learning about these things, the only thing that I can say to you is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had once said in an interview that I may not have had everything that I wanted in life at the same time, but over the course of my life, I have had everything I ever wanted. And that is coming from a Supreme Court judge of the United States of America. But if you ask for my personal opinion, ki when there will be enough judges in the Supreme Court of India, I think when there are at least 30 on the bench, then there will be enough.
I totally agree with you, ma'am, over here, because we can say that everything is a social construct. At the end of
Yes.
the day, we can say that you can break the norms,
Hmm.
but saying something and taking an action towards it is very
Yes.
different. And
Right.
we might say that we can get rid of the discrimination. We can say that, but when you enter the practical life and the roles that have been allotted to us, that makes it pretty hard for us to do that. So,
Right.
since we have started to talk about women,
Mhm.
are there any unsung or simply uncelebrated provisions in the Constitution of India that women have no idea about? and we fellow women should know about them? If you could just take 4 or 5 of them.
See, I would say that the Constitution allows the legislation to make special laws for women. Now, the field of law where I have seen a significant progress being made as far as protection of women is concerned would be by means of the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. A lot of new offenses found place in the Indian Penal Code which otherwise were being neglected, and women found themselves to be completely unprotected from those attacks. Uh, Acid attacks, voyeurism, stalking, sexual harassment, all these things now find a place in our penal code. They come with, they bring with themselves sentences for punishment of significant periods. And I think that's what the women in our country should be aware of, that they can go and file a complaint if they feel that they're being stalked, if they are being harassed in their workplace. Then it is not just the protection of women from sexual harassment at the Workplace Act which protects them, and also lodge a formal complaint with the police for sexual harassment. There are numerous provisions of law which protect the dignity, liberties of a woman, which they're not aware of, which I believe should become a part of the regular curriculum of schools. Like I was just telling you about the Criminal Law Amendment Act. If we go by the provisions, 354C CRIPC provides voyeurism as an offense. So if you feel like there's somebody who's looking at you or is trying to take pictures of you, is trying to catch you in a situation which is vulnerable, you can always go and file a complaint in the concerned police station. If you feel like you're being stalked, you please go file a complaint in the concerned police. You're protected under 354D of the Indian Penal Code. The definition of rape has been enlarged under section 375. It is no longer a restrictive definition. It's quite comprehensive now. You should come forward and report an incident if you've had it. Another important another important change in law that I would like to point out to you: all hospitals, private or public, are mandatorily required under law to provide first aid or medical treatment free of cost to a woman who has been the victim of an offense under section 376A to E, as well as 326A of the Indian Penal Code. So be it rape or assault, acid attack, you are entitled to free of cost treatment in any public or private hospital. Every woman should be aware of these rights. Suppose if you have images and you're being threatened that those images of you in a vulnerable position will be released, you have protection of the law. You can always file a complaint under 503 of the Indian Penal Code for criminal intimidation when there is a threat. If those pictures have been released, you have a right to be protected under sections 66E, 67, 67A, and 72 of the Information Technology Act. You have a protection of your right to privacy. You must exercise it. These are the things which women, I believe, should be aware of. These are difficulties which they face every day, be it in their workplace, be it at home, be it in their relationships. Similarly, let's come to property laws. Every woman should be aware that irrespective of her marital status, her date of birth, she is entitled to a right in her father's property. It's not just her brother's. She cannot be asked to relinquish her portion. She is entitled under law to have a right in it, have an interest in it. So these are things which I believe are very important, and every woman should be aware of these rights, which is why I also advocate aggressively that these should be made a part of the regular curriculum at school for women to know that there's something that protects them. It's not like they don't have a voice. Their concerns can be voiced and they will be given the protection of the law. So that's what I wanted to highlight.
To all the dear ladies watching this was a pretty informative part. And also, I have a question right now after hearing what you said. Not in metropolitan cities, but in urban areas, there's a concept of moral policing.
That's true.
So in that case, and since a number of people, they are not open to their parents about their respective relationships, and therefore
Right.
they fear it, and easily they can be convinced or manipulated by other people, the crowd, or the police themselves. So in this case, what can be the things that they could do?
This is where education and awareness about the rights comes into the picture. If you are aware, you can take those steps on your own. If you are aware that the law is on your side, then the question of manipulation does not arise, because then the person trying to manipulate you will not be able to do so, for the simple reason that I, as a woman, am aware of the protection that the law grants to me, and the right over my body and my privacy that I have is protected by the constitution and by the statutes of this country. So in that situation, the question of manipulation or me being tricked into me being tricked into situation does not arise. That's why I was speaking about or telling you that it is important for the school curriculums to have this as a part of their regular course. Awareness is the first step towards protecting yourself. If you're not aware, you will not be in a position to protect yourself.
After listening to your conversation, I am somebody who has received like really good education till date, and I still was unaware about a lot of things. So I can also relate how classism plays into it. That a particular person who's not literate enough, or probably not up to that mark, did not receive proper education. Any woman who's just expected to do the bare minimum and to follow in the patriarchal concept of how a woman should be, she is going to miss out a big time on all of these things. And I hope that we do something or introduce something, if not curriculum, because a number of people do not have the access to go to schools. But we should definitely bring about certain level of awareness about this, because I feel this is really informative for every woman.
That's true, and there
So
are a lot of NGOs who are doing this kind of work. In a lot of villages, you will find that there are primary schools or anganwadis who are actually trying to impart this knowledge to the women of that particular society. And I believe that's the starting point. That's a good starting point, but it is still something which requires a lot of work.
So, ma'am, my next question to you takes us to the other facet of this conversation. I'm sure a number of our viewers, people who will be viewing this live after it is being uploaded, I'm sure that all of you are possibly aware about the POCSO Act. But, ma'am, over here, I would want you to tell us in detail about it, and how successful has it been since its inception in the year 2012? Like, what changes have been brought about since the act was introduced?
Uh, See, POCSO, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, was brought into force with a very clear objective. The objective was to protect children from not only sexual assault, but also something which was termed as sexual embarrassment and pornography, and setting up of special courts for this purpose. Article 15 of the Constitution permits the legislation to make special laws for children. When this article is read with Article 37, it's actually a duty of the state to direct its policy towards making laws that protects children in their tender age from abuse, ensures that their childhood and youth is protected against exploitation, and also that they're given an opportunity to develop in a healthy environment. And that's why this act was brought into force. There's many things about the act which are different from general criminal jurisprudence. For example, other than defining the offenses of sexual assault or aggravated sexual assault or penetrative assault or aggravated penetrative assault, uh, the thing which is the most distinctive about the act is that the presumption is flipped. Under general criminal jurisprudence, the presumption is in favor of the accused, that he is innocent until proven guilty. However, as an extra protection under the POCSO Act, under Section 29, the presumption is of guilt until proven innocent. And that, I believe, is a very big protection. The second aspect is that not only does it provide for the offenses and the punishments and special courts, under section 23 it also talks about manner of reporting of offenses against minors or children, how the media is to go about reporting these cases. It places limitations on revealing their identity, on being sensitive, on the manner in which that information is to be conveyed. There are numerous aspects of this act which I believe are brilliantly written and ensure protection of the children. But like most laws, it is not foolproof. There are obviously certain loopholes, delays, um, aspects which are not as clearly defined. Uh, but we are still, I would still believe that it's a step in the right direction. It's still progress, even though it is not exactly where it should be, but I would still deem it to be progress.
My this question to you was linked with the fact, ma'am, that I came across Sunita Krishnan's TED talk and how she rescues children from sex slavery and everything around the heinous crime, and how she urges people, don't be a philanthropist, don't be of charity, make something about it, don't turn a blind eye towards it. And when I hear about such norms, it brings a sigh of relief to me. So thank you. It was really necessary for a number of people who still had a lot of confusion about it and were really lazy to search it up on Google. So thank you, ma'am, for that. So
Not to worry. Huh.
my next question to you, ma'am, is everybody is aware that the Pride Month recently drew to a close. And a number of legal practitioners, they've proudly come out to be identifying with the LGBTQIA plus community, while others claim that they are allies of it. So how welcoming can you say is the judiciary towards this particular set of people?
See, I would like to say that had the judiciary not been welcoming of the LGBTQIA plus community, then you wouldn't have seen such a rise in the number of people who now feel comfortable to come out and be their true selves. Uh, in 2018, the Supreme Court struck down Section 377 partially by a unanimous judgment of 5 judges. And they, in no unclear terms, they just protected an individual's dignity and the right to be their true self. And again, it's a start, but at least it's a start in the right direction. And we're seeing the influence that that judgment has caused. This year, just a few months ago, Madras High Court has, by means of a judgment, given detailed guidelines on how the police and the media is to go about while dealing with individuals who identify as LGBTQIA+, how the police is to deal with missing persons reports which are lodged by their parents and how they are to be treated. There are numerous instances, small, but yet they are present, which tell me that there is a change that is happening, but that change will take its own time.
Ma'am, I completely agree with you. And I also feel that these problems in itself are so complicated. And when hierarchy steps in, like for example, people in Bombay somewhat are not that closeted and they get the right to celebrate the Pride Month. Whereas I would not expect somebody sitting in a really small city of, let's say, Uttar Pradesh, will get the right. So I think even if the judiciary wants to build an equilibrium, us as a society are just pulling people down for it, and we are not acknowledging somebody's identity. So I think over here I totally agree with you. The judiciary has started to change, but people also need to begin with that.
I agree. See, in a democratic society, what is at the heart of the democracy is the individual. And if the individual is not permitted to be their true self, accept their personality for what it is, and still be entitled to the protections of law, then that is something which brings the democracy itself a step back. And that's where I believe the judiciary, by means of the judgment in Navtej Singh for the five judges bench, has tried to take us forward as a country in this department.
Indeed, ma'am. And my last question to you would be, I don't know want this conversation to end so quickly since it was so informative, but still, my last question to you would be that you are somebody who's enormously well versed with law, right? And do you feel that there are certain aspects to judiciary that they need to reconsider since with evolving times and change in consumer behavior and the way we today process and think about the news that we are given, our present day requirements might have outgrown the laws framed years back? If you can just give us a fresher and more informative and enlightened perspective on this.
See, since we were just on the topic of freedom of speech and expression, and the reasonable restrictions that are placed on that freedom by means of Article 19 too. I think that, coupled with the law of sedition, is something which we may be on the verge of rethinking. There is a judgment, there's actually a case pending before the Supreme Court of India by the name, which relates to Sudarshan TV, relating to a show which they were airing by the name of UPSC Jihad. Uh, that is a matter that is dealing with these reasonable restrictions on an in-depth level. And I believe that that will be a judgment which will lead us to rethink these reasonable restrictions and our definition of what constitutes sedition. So I think that is one aspect which in today's time is of great significance.
So, ma'am, it was great speaking to you. And I'm sure a number of our viewers would have gotten a fresher perspective on this entire topic in how judiciary works. We need to understand at the end of the day that our judicial system is more than what media at times portrays it to be. And not
Certainly.
everything that you read on the internet is true. You might
Right.
want to do some in depth research because we have a number of very learned professionals like ma'am who can give you a lesson on this. And I think this was such a needed topic at this time because a number of us, including myself at times, we do not want to know the how and what of the things. We just want to see what the media gives us in the easiest form available. So my urge to everybody would be not to draw a conclusion unless and until you're examining all the sides of the coin. And ma'am, it was pleasure talking to you. It was a
No, I
pleasure talking to you.
genuinely appreciate the opportunity that you gave me to come on to this live and give my 2 cents to the situation. And it was lovely talking to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
I'm
you.
really grateful. Thank you so much.
And we are grateful for you to be here. Thank you so
I,
much for coming, ma'am.
thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.